Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Peter Frank and I'll be leading our session today. It's titled Basic Introduction to Church360 Ledger. We're going to go through the core functionality of this church finance software, starting from the ground up and getting to some mid-level. We're not going to go too far advanced. That gets into more advanced finances, and so we're not going to talk about that today. But I really want to give you a good idea of how this software works and how it can work for your congregation. So without further ado, let me pull up my introduction slide. This is me and my contact information there. The best way to reach me is my email address, but my phone number is there as well for you. That gets you right to my office phone, which I always check to make sure I have forwarding to voicemail during the presentation, which is the case today. So don't try calling right now. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. I always love to hear the ways that our churches are using software, ours or otherwise, or any kind of technology for that matter, to further share the gospel. Now, I've been with Concordia Technology Solutions as senior manager for about 6 years now. We launched Church360 Ledger, I believe, in 2014. I know it's been, I've been with the team ever since the very start of that development process. So I feel like I have a good understanding of that, how to use it, even though I am not an expert at finances. The goal behind it was to build it for people who are not an expert with finances. So I fit right in there. A few housekeeping items before I go too far. First off, I have about 50 minutes prepared for presentation, 10 minutes for question and answers at the end. I often go over that 50 minutes, so feel free to ask questions as we go to make sure I have a nice big queue of questions, and that'll kind of reel me in and make sure that I stay at that 50-minute mark. We will be recording this webinar and we'll be sharing the recording later on. So you'll be able to review any information that we cover too fast, or maybe if there's somebody else at your congregation who would like to see it, you're welcome to share it with them after the fact. So that'll be going out later today or tomorrow, depending on how quickly we can get that turned around this afternoon. A little bit about ourselves, Concordia Technology Solutions. We are the church administration division of Concordia Publishing House. And we've been producing church software since 1984, which is kind of mind-boggling to me because I know a little bit about the technology back then, although I was very young. It's very different today and much more powerful. And so Church360 Ledger is one of those latest iterations of best practices in church software. Now, if you're not familiar with this product, it is part of the Church360 software suite. There are two other software solutions in that suite, Church360 Members and Church360 Unite. Church360 Members helps you manage your members, membership information, people, households, attendance, offerings. And that's an important thing to note. Ledger is not about offerings and contributions. It's all about the money that is going out. We certainly track the money coming in, but not down to the level of individual tracking and giving statements. That's done in Church360 Members. Church360 Unite is your church website builder. That provides a variety of communication tools for you to use in your church. Now, both of those we've already done live webinars earlier in the week. Unite was yesterday, Members was on Tuesday. So those recordings are already available for you if you're interested in learning more. We won't be covering those in details today. And if there are questions about those, I'll defer you to our support team or to contacting me after the fact. Today is all about Church360 Ledger. Now, Church360 Ledger is church finance software. It's online church finance software, so you can access it anywhere you need to. It is designed to be intuitive, secure, and focused on the church and church workers specifically, which means we try not to get into the financial jargon. We try not to get into anything that a church might not need from a financial standpoint. There are lots of options out there, and some of them are very big and powerful and good. But they have things like inventory, which a church doesn't usually have. People are certainly not your inventory. Now, if you run a store, that's a different matter. But we really want to focus on the things that churches need and to keep it simple. Now, I always make a few assumptions about who is attending my webinars, and today is no different. I am assuming that you are at least familiar with church finances. If you have never done any church finances before, Church360 Ledger isn't going to do them for you. It requires some kind of knowledge about church finances, not an extensive amount. It's going to help you out as much as possible, but you can't come in off the street and start doing church finances, nor would I think a church allow people to do that. So just know you have to be familiar with them. You don't have to be that expert. Again, I'm not an expert on church finances, and Ledger is easy for me to use. Now, I do assume you are new to Church360 Ledger. We've got hundreds of churches actively using it right now. And if you are one of those, welcome, thanks for being here. You'll be able to pick up some things along the way, but for the most part, this is gonna be just for people who have never used Church360 Ledger before. So I like to make that clear. I don't wanna waste your time at all. And on that note, I know you're extremely busy. So if you have things that interrupt you during this, that's why we record it. We understand that the work of the church is far more than just software. And so we want to make it as easy as possible to give you the information you need without taking away from your other priorities. So I assume you're busy. I've yet to meet a church worker who's not, volunteer, paid, or otherwise. All right, so now is the time for me to hear a little bit about who is here. There's two ways we're going to do this. The first way, and I want to make sure everybody knows how to use the chat. The first way is I'm going to ask you to share your name and your city and your state. This gives me just a good idea of where people are coming from. Oops, I hit the button too soon. But more than that, it helps you know where to go and put questions in. So we're using a tool called GoToWebinar. In that interface, there should be a place that you see for entering questions or chat. Depending on which application you're using, it may be phrased a little bit differently. But go ahead and submit in there your name and your city and your state. If you want to put your church name in there, that's fine. But this gives me a chance to see who all is here and make sure that you know how to use the chat. All right, so we have Janet from Salt Lake City in Utah. Michelle from Marietta, Georgia, Marcine from Perrysburg, Ohio, Steve from Gurnee, Illinois, not too far from where I grew up. I grew up in Algonquin, Illinois, about an hour away, so not too close, but not too far either. Bradford from Greensboro, North Carolina. Welcome to all of you who are here today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. Now, the next thing I'm going to ask you to tell me a little bit about yourself is to select your primary role at your congregation. So I'm going to launch this now. I know that lots of people wear lots of hats in the church. This is just your primary role, the kind of thing you might put on your business card. If you have a business card for the church, you might also just be a volunteer. I know a lot of our finance managers are volunteers. And as I look at who is letting me know they're there, it is almost exclusively financial managers, which is very good. It's fun to see this in Church360 Ledger, how many different types of people attend. Now, I see we have a number who are marking other. I'd love to hear what your role is, even if you are, especially since you're not listed above. So please just let me know your title or what you're doing for the church. Doesn't have to be too formal. It just gives me a better understanding of who is here. So yeah, it looks like we've got a financial manager, church president. Oh, and Joyce is here right in St. Louis, Missouri. Well, just somewhere not too far from where we are. We're broadcasting this from St. Louis. So Joyce, welcome aboard. Thanks for being here. All right, very good. Well, please continue to submit any comments as we go. Again, questions are welcome throughout the entire presentation. I may not stop and answer them right then, but we'll have time at the very end for it. All right, let's go through the outline for today. Very simple outline. Again, this is a basic introduction. So we're going to talk about the goals of Church360 Ledger and what that means, what we were trying to accomplish as we built it. We're going to do a tour of the software. So we're going to hit all of the key features. We're going to go into a little bit of very practical examples, but the goal is to show off how to use it, not to complete an account. So I'll show you what that means in a few moments. And then finally, the question and answers. That's an important part of any presentation, is to make sure that you came with, or you leave with answers to the questions you came with. All right, so let's dig into those goals. What are the goals of Church360 Ledger? What was our kind of resounding themes as our team built it? And I say we, I was involved in the planning process. I'm not a programmer, so I didn't actually build it myself, but part of the process for me was speaking on behalf of you, our church workers. All right, so first off, we understand church workers or church finances are often managed by volunteers, not paid staff people. I know that every church, if they could afford it, would pay a staff person to be their financial manager because it works out better, but many churches can't do that. So volunteers are a key part of church finances. Even when you have a paid staff person, there's enough work that volunteers need to be utilized. We also know that most volunteers are not accountants. Now, many congregations are blessed to have accountants in their congregations who serve by providing their time and talents in accounting, but that's not always the case. We understand that. We know that accountability is important, but even more important in the church than elsewhere. Anytime you're dealing with finances, accountability is important, but especially in the church because it's gifts that are given by the members. So we help you practice good accountability by preventing the ill intention from doing wrong. And I'll show what that means in a little while. You can certainly do all sorts of things with church finances, and you can certainly lie and not put it into the software right. But sometimes some of the things that those who are ill-intentioned are doing are putting in accurate transactions with slight lies to try to hide what they are doing. And we do things like prevent you from editing transactions without an audit trail. We make you always have a beginning balance after the first transaction session. You can't change that beginning balance. We're trying to lock down these changes so that everything is tracked. So while we can't prevent all situations, we can prevent the ones that would happen in our software. So I'll show you that in a little while. But we also do this by preventing the well-intentioned from making mistakes. And I think this is probably much more common in church finances. Certainly there are bad eggs out there everywhere who are tempted to do wrong and fall to that temptation. But more often, we'll find people who are always trying to do the right thing, but don't have the experience or the understanding. And so as we built Church360 Ledger, we tried to make it as simple and straightforward to do the right thing, financially speaking, to do the right thing in terms of tracking the transactions and making it easy to track every last detail. So you'll see that as we go, but that's a key part of it, is knowing that most of the people who use our software are completely well-intentioned, if not the 99% of them. Most makes it sound like it's not as a full number. All right, so Church360 Ledger was designed to increase accountability and prevent mistakes. So you'll see that throughout Church360 Ledger. So today, we are going to go through a basic introduction that focuses first and foremost on charts of accounts, how to budget for specific accounts, namely income and expenses, how to enter in transactions, and what does that do to the debits or credits and debits. That's a key part of it, and I know that most of you, especially since the majority of you are financial managers, are probably going to want to know exactly how to do that and to know that the credits and debits are done exactly right. Then we're going to talk about reconciliation. That's an important part of that accountability, is making sure you reconcile your cash and understand where those actual dollars are compared to what they say, where the ledger says they are. And finally, we'll look at reports, and we'll talk through how that process works. We've got key financial statements in there. They're very easy to use and flexible for quickly viewing that information and being able to understand where the church is at. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch screens here. All right, this is, there we go, the home screen for Church360 Ledger's website. And I like to start here because I encourage all of you, if you haven't already, to start a free trial. Now, if you are already using Church360 Members or Church360 Unite, you are welcome to start a free trial from here. You won't be able to do that with your existing subdomain, but a software consultant can help you with that. But you're also welcome, even if you are an existing customer, to try this free trial kind of from scratch. Play around with it, enter in kind of test data just to get a feel for it. I know some people are nervous to start a free trial because what if I screw it up? I don't want to screw up this data or put in fake data forever. Well, we can always set up a new account for you. We really want you to try it and use it. So I've already gone through here and filled out my form. And when I click Start Today, I almost immediately, within seconds, receive an email from us, and I put it in just for Concordia Publishing House, and then I click the Set Up Account Now. And that then took me to this screen here, which is where we begin. Now I've already entered in my email, a fake email, and my password. So I'm gonna go ahead and sign up, make sure it hasn't timed out. That was a little while ago, good. All right, so now I'll go in here and put in my phone number and my address. And then I'll go ahead and submit. I just want to show you how easy this is, and especially this first part. Let me zoom in a bit. So the first part says, do you want to create your first book or import your Shepherd Staff Finance database? Now, if you are brand new to Concordia, you'll want to just create your first book. If you already use Shepherd Staff, our PC-based church management software, you can upload your database and bring it in. Now, there's a few words of caution. In Church360 Ledger, we do things differently than in Shepherd Staff. Whereas in Shepherd Staff, there's dedicated accounts that are almost a separate type of account. In Church360 Ledger, we use what we call restricted funds to serve that purpose. And those don't always equate. So while we can import your database, bring over your payees and your chart of accounts, we can't bring over all of your transactions if you have used dedicated accounts. That's something that can be kind of confusing, and be happy to speak with you more about it. But for those of you who don't understand that, I don't want to waste your time. So feel free with your first trial just to create your first book and get started. And so I'm going to name my first book. My book is my chart of accounts. And I'm just going to call this, let's see, I'm going to call this, let's go with Salem Lutheran Church. That is my church here in St. Louis. And we run on a non-fiscal year. I'm going to go with a calendar year, a non-calendar fiscal year, but I'm going to go with a calendar fiscal year today. And I'll hit submit. And what it's going to do is it's going to activate my account. And you'll see up here in the top left, that's where my book is. Now, right now, I only have one book. At my church, we have a school, and we keep those on one set of books. But if you keep them on separate set of books, or maybe you have other organizations that have multiple books, you can set up additional ones by going over here to the Settings tab. Now, we'll go do that in just a second. Let me clarify the navigation, because that probably would be helpful to do that to start. So you'll see here we've got the Ledger logo and the book name. Then you have the print queue, reports is the next icon, then settings and user profile. And there's a weird image there. That's because we try to import your profile photo if you've ever set it up using a tool called Gravatar. And if you haven't, you get a very unique ID or a unique image. So just know that's what that is. Then we have what we call here our account bar, or Omni bar is a phrase we've used before, which lets you go to any account just by clicking and searching for it. And then you have your new transactions view. So you can always add a new transaction from any view. All right, let's go into settings and go into books. While that loads, I see a question and asking about, can we have dedicated giving accounts? Like I mentioned, we call those restricted funds, and I'll show those in just a moment. And then we also have the question, can you import from QuickBooks to start the software? No, you cannot, but that is because that is not one of our products. The import is a proprietary process. We haven't been able to do that yet, although we're considering trying different ways. It's not an easy process. All right, so going back here, we've got books. If you had a separate set of books for your school, you could add a new one, and maybe this would be Salem Lutheran School. And we could say starting July, and we'll do it starting July of 2017. It's a non-calendar fiscal year. You can do that with different books. Now, one of the questions that's coming in is, can different books have different security? Absolutely. One of the cool things about this is that under settings, anything above the line is unique to the set of books, and anything below the line can vary depending on the book. So you can have similar settings, similar users, but you can change things with that. So we'll get into users and roles and security later on. But just to understand why that line is in there, these things in the bottom half refer to your account. And on the top, it's to your book. So I like to clarify that because that kind of serves as the basis for navigation. All right, so we can go ahead and hit submit and save that. And now I've got two books that I can toggle between right up here at the top. I hope that makes sense. Again, it's a little bit of a different way of doing things because many churches just have one set of books. But we do this because we know churches as an organization, like my church, is a church and school. And then we also have a men's club, and we have a MOPS group, and different groups that manage different accounts, but they're all part of the same church. And so rather than requiring them to each get their own account, for your church entity, you can have multiple sets of books. So now you can't share that with the church down the street, nor would you want to, but you can share it with others in your organization. All right, the next thing we're going to do, which is always a great first step, because without accounts, you can't do anything, is to set up the chart of accounts. So I'm going to go here to chart of accounts. And there are four types of accounts. There's assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. Assets is representative of real cash, real dollars, meaning things like bank accounts, checking accounts. Liabilities is things where you owe real dollars, real cash. Things like mortgages or credit cards, any kind of loan where you need to pay it back. Even things like organizations where you can put it on account, like Concordia Publishing House. You can say, all right, CPH, please bill me for this Vacation Bible School starter kit. You could create a liability account for that so that you know that you still owe that, but then you can track that expense right away. Now that's getting a little complicated in finances before we even set up our accounts. So I just want to give you that kind of preview. Now, income and expenses is representative of real dollars, but they're not representative of where those dollars are stored. It's representative of where the dollars came from and where they were spent. And so you can't go and find your income account for offerings in one specific location, because once you deposit it, you may put it in different accounts. So this is really looking at it from two ways. Now, this is standard accounting. It's nothing complicated, nothing unique to Church360 Ledger. But if you're fairly new to finances, it's good to clarify that. So let's go through and add a few example accounts. So under assets, I'll click new category first. And the categories are more like filing folders. So I'm going to call this, let's just go US Bank. This is our US Bank account. Within there, we have an actual account called savings. And you can put in an account number that's optional. It's helpful for searching, but nothing too much more. So I'm just going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to say an initial balance of 0. Can you write checks from this account? No. I'm going to hit submit. And I'm going to move this over here. Now I'm going to add another one called checking. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Or 7, there we go, 7, 8, 9. I can write checks from this account, but again, I have a 0 initial balance. I'm going to hit submit. And then I'm going to drag and drop checking underneath. You can see by that little red arrow where it is. Now, what I like about this, and what you'll find to be useful, is that US Bank gets summarized by the total of all the accounts underneath it, how much assets there are, that total cash value, and it'll summarize that. And that can be for any type of account. You can add multiple categories, multiple tiers to help get your subtotals. How you set up your chart account of accounts is really up to you and any financial advisors that you have. We cannot advise on the best way to do charts of accounts because there's a lot that goes into every situation. But what we can do is show you how to use the tool. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save changes there. We're going to come back to assets in just a few moments, but I'm going to confirm that and it'll tell me what's been created. I'm going to go down here to liabilities. I'm going to create a new account and we'll say this is the mortgage. And I'm going to do 789 123 and a mortgage of $200,000. And that is what we owe on our mortgage. I'll hit Save Changes there. Actually, I'm going to also add another account, and we're going to call this credit card. Yeah, credit card. I'm going to add something else. Fee or 321654 with a 0 initial balance. I'm going to add a category, and I'm going to call this Southwest Visa. It's a fantastic deal if you want to earn airline miles. So I'm going to move that over there, and I'm not going to put mortgage under category because I don't have to. And then we'll save that, confirm. All right, now let's look at income. How does the church receive money? Well, the first category we're going to call offerings. And I'll save that. In the next category, I'm going to call other income. We'll save that. Then I'm going to create a new account, and I'm going to call this general fund. And I'll save that. I'm not going to, put this initial balance of 0. Put that under offerings. Then I'm going to create another account and call it building fund. 0 initial balance there. And drag it in. And then I'm going to do another account, and I'm going to call this rental. Let's call it facilities rental. And 0 balance there. That way, if people are renting the space for a party or a wedding rehearsal or something like that, we can track that income. All right, we're going to confirm that. Now next, we're going to, I think you mixed up your last tier of liabilities. Wendy just said that. Let me check that. Southwest Visa and credit card. You know, you're right. I probably should rename those credit card and then Southwest Visa. That would be more logical. Thank you for that. All right, we'll save that. Good. That is much more logical. That fits my organizational structure. Thank you for that, Wendy. All right, income is good, expenses. Now we're going to do a new category, and I'm going to call this one ministry expenses. I'm going to do another one called facility expenses, and we'll submit that, and I'll do new account. We're going to call this one Vacation Bible School. For many churches that has already occurred. For some, it's still coming up. All right, and then I'm going to add another account, and we're going to call this electricity. Now, certainly you're going to want far more than these. In fact, from what I've seen, expenses are the ones that are most categorized in a church because there's so many different types of expenses. And income is a little bit smaller, quite a bit smaller actually, although we'd love to have there be many different sources of income. But we'll go ahead and save that. And I'm going to confirm. So now my chart of accounts is at least set for demonstration purposes. It's far from set for a practical congregation. Of course, you don't want to sit and watch me do all of that. But what I want to do next is show you budgets. So as I go up to settings and I go down here, budgets is something that's unique to my chart of accounts. That's the second thing here. So budgets are what you do on an annual basis to determine how much money is coming in, or how much expected money is coming in, and how much expected money is going out. So that's something that we talk about in my congregation, is that these are not guarantees. This is just expectant, what we're expecting to happen so that we can plan properly and make decisions based on saying, well, we don't expect to have a balanced bottom line, so we need to cut some expenses or find a way to grow our income. Or maybe it's the other, well, we're expecting a lot more income than expenses. What's the best way as God's stewards to use this? So that's the preferred situation and also the least common. All right, so income and offerings. There's a couple different ways you can do that. Before I do that, I should clarify. You can set the fiscal year. Now, fiscal years are something that you really only manage once or once a year, or if you're changing it. Underneath settings, there's a fiscal years here where you can go and change whether the month starts. You can do a short fiscal year. You can also lock fiscal years there. But for budgeting, generally that is for the next fiscal year, unless you're running behind. So we're going to go to January 2019 or January to December 2019 and start setting up our budget. So there's a couple ways of doing this. One, you can go to totals and say, we expect $500,000 to come in from for the general fund. And when I put it in the total, it splits everything out divided by 12. And maybe building fund, you realize we don't get building fund campaign or offerings except during our campaign in June. And we're probably going to get $15,000 for that. So I can put that in June. So I can go by month, I can go by year and split it up. I can even go back in here and say, all right, well, December, even though we got 41,666, I'm going to put that at 55,000. And June, because of our big push for the building fund, we're probably going to get 375 to the general fund, and it's slow because of vacations. And you can start playing around with that. Now, once you have data in the system, you can start using these tools like previous year budget or previous year actuals to pre-populate it and adjust from there. So it's a really powerful tool, and it gets even more powerful when you begin to export and bring in information. So you can export all of this to Excel, update it there, or distribute it for others to update, come back into Ledger, copy and paste it from Excel, and it'll go right in. So there's information about that in our Help Center, which I should point out is in the lower right-hand corner by that I. You can enter in help articles, or you can enter in searches, and they'll come up with help articles to help you. So add in a budget. It'll tell you all about that, and you can click on the very bottom to see the original article, which takes you to our Help Center. And there's a lot of information there. All right, I'm going to close out on that, close out on this. Same thing can be done for income or for expenses. We're not going to go through all of that. I just want to show you how easy it is to add budgets in here. You'll notice we also kind of break the space too. We try to give you everything at once. Now, if your screen size is really small, it may start scrolling, but we've tried to give you as much space as possible to enter your budgets. All right, your budgets were updated. Very good. All right, so that is how to enter income and expense budgets, and those will show in different places. But let's get into transactions. So if I click on the Ledger button up at the top, the little orange logo, it's going to take me back to the main page. I do actually have to click on it. All right, so you can see here that it's showing all my transactions, which at this point is 1. We had the initial balance put in here for $200,000 on liabilities for mortgage. So we didn't put any balances for anything else, and that's what we're going to do to start off here. So I'm going to go up to New Transactions, and I'm going to click on Deposit. So let's say you're starting off this new fiscal year with a new bank, and you exported your savings account, exported. You can tell how much I'm in software. You withdrew your savings account to add to this new savings account at the this new bank. So I can put in here transfer from old bank account. All right, I'm going to do that just as of today, and I'm going to say what asset is it going into? It's going into savings. And what income is it coming from? Now, with the transfer, that's a little bit different. I should have used a different example here. Let's say initial offerings. That'll make more sense. Transfer I'll show in a second. Initial offerings. This is more practical. What's the initial offerings for this church? So let's say there's 1,500 coming in, or actually we'll put it up, 150,000. That's a really good day. Now you'll notice that as I enter things in, I've got this kind of remaining amount. So let's say it was 150,000 and we'd entered in 1,500 like this. It says, all right, well, what are you gonna do with the other $148,500? So as I add in the numbers, it kind of clears it out and balances for me. Now you can tell it balances by looking down here. See, there's the T chart where you've got the accounts and the debits and the credits. Now, for those of you who are not experts in finance, you may not be familiar with this. This is something that I have struggled to memorize, which is why I keep a nice slide. In fact, I have it printed out and put on my bulletin board so that I can always keep this in the back of my mind. So in order to for example, increase an asset, you need to debit that asset. And if you are increasing income, you need to credit that. And it needs to balance. Your total on the debit side needs to balance with the credit side. Now, most of this is, well, all of this is really just journal entries. You're adding an entry to the journal of your accounts. But the way we do it in Church360 Ledger is we call them transaction paths, which are doing a journal entry, but making it more descriptive for you. So in this case, when we did a deposit, that is going in and debiting, see, I still get that confused, debiting an asset and crediting an income account, just like we did here. But it's put it in the way that you might think, all right, where am I depositing this? I'm gonna put it in this asset. Where's it coming from? It's gonna be this income. And it balances here. And if it doesn't balance, so let's say you've got 25,000 left, you can add another line for building fund, and it shows up there. So it's still an income account, so you're still gonna be crediting that. So it balances this right here. All right, let's go ahead and click save. All right, so we are still gonna be short overall because our assets are less than our liabilities, but we'll increase that in just a moment. All right, so there's your initial deposit. Now you can go in and do a journal entry just the same. So new transaction, journal entry. So let's say you do know what you're doing with debits and credits, and you want to just do it straight from the account lines. There's not much here. You can do a memo and a payee that's optional and just say, okay, let's go to savings. I want to, and I'll go back here to see this, I want to increase my savings, so I'm going to debit it, and I need to do that from an income account, so I'm going to credit that. Oops. Pardon me, there we go. All right, so savings, and then we'll just do general fund. And so we're going to put in, I am going to debit $100,000 to my savings and credit $100,000 to my general fund. And you can see it turns green when they balance. All right, so I'll click save, and now that's been added. And now you can see my chart is starting to change. It has now gone and shown where the running balance for all my accounts summarized, my actual assets, so assets less liabilities, is $50,000. Now, if I wanted to drill into this, that's what this navigation is here. So I can go assets, US Bank, savings, and I can see all of the transactions just for that account. Then I can quickly go back to home and jump into one of these other ones. Now, if that's not helpful, just click the little arrow, close that, and you can say, all right, well, show me US Bank, and then we can see, okay, there's a checking and a savings there. All right, there's savings. Well, let's go to the next transaction type. Well, actually the first one, which is transfer, but that's the next one we're gonna do. All right, so transfer can be done from any account to any account that is the same. So if we go from savings, that's an asset account, and to checking, let's say we're gonna move $10,000 from savings to checking, and we'll just call the memo initial transfer to checking. So that's how that works. Now, certainly you can do any kind of transfer that's logical with a journal entry by just putting in the right accounts and the right credits and debits. But the way we see it is that transfers are most likely just moving money from one type of account to the same kind of account. That's why we create this easy transaction path that once you select the first account, like assets, the only accounts available for you to select over here are other assets. So that just makes it easy to know what you can transfer to based on your original intention. That's where we're trying to prevent those mistakes and saying, okay, I don't mean to transfer from my savings to an expense account. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So unless you're doing a return or something like that, you know, even from my savings to my expense isn't a return, that's a payment, but that's weird to call it a transfer. So yeah, that's why we put it in this way. So it always brings up the same type of account. So I'll go ahead and save that. And now you can see that I reduced it by 10,000 there. If I go to US Bank, I can see both sides of that transaction. All right, let's do payments. So payments, let's say we're doing a payment from a credit card. So a lot of churches have credit cards. They pay them off every month. Getting into debt is not a great thing for a church, but if you're paying it off every month, you can take advantage of some of the rewards that come from credit cards. So we're going to say Southwest Visa. I want to charge $50 to that, and that is Vacation Bible School expenses. And so the payee, we're buying crafts from Concordia Publishing House. I type that in, hit enter. Oops, I didn't mean to hit enter. That's okay. Let's go back here. The transaction was pretty much complete. So now I can go, that's why enter worked. But it's created a payee called Concordia Publishing House. So you can see there that the debits and the credits are applied. So we're crediting a liability, which means we're increasing that. And then we're debiting an expense, which means we're increasing that. So that makes sense. Now, when we go back here, we'll just go straight to home. I forgot I closed that. You can see my liabilities are now $200,050 because my liabilities include not just the mortgage, but also the credit card. Now, if we wanted to pay off the credit card, let's say we were writing a check, which is another kind of payment, I can go in here and say credit card payment. And I can't really type, but that's okay. And we'll just call this Visa. And we're doing it from the checking for $50 to the Southwest Visa. And the little, that will usually tell me if there's not enough money. I'm not sure why that's popping up now. We did put it into checking. So maybe it's because of the balance time frame. It wasn't at the beginning of the day. Okay. So we'll go ahead and say from checking to Southwest Visa, this is what we're paying. And when I click save, now my Southwest Visa, my credit card there, my whole credit card amount, and then my Southwest Visa under that is now 0 because we've paid it off. And if I go into my checking account, you can see what that looks like. Initial transfer, and then I paid $50 from that. So that all works out, and we're building up this whole record of transactions here. You can see each of these line items are coming through. All right, next up, we are going to go, and we've already done all of these things. I didn't show you the check print queue, actually. Now that I've saved this in my check print queue, I can go and print a check. I can click on here and say print, and it'll show me what my check will look like. You can buy pre-printed checks with your church's name and logo on it from our partner, Forms Plus Inc. They're a great organization. We've worked with them for 20 plus years on checks. And we've built this to be specific to their Church360 Ledger check template. Now you can change it so that the check goes into the middle. Some people prefer that. That's an option under the general settings. When you go to print, it says, what is the check number? And you can type in the check number that's on there, confirm that, and it'll send it to your printer. You still have one last chance to see it before it prints. You can say, all right, that's good, hit print. We're gonna hit cancel for right now. Now, when you go in here, it'll still show up in your queue, but you can click mark as printed just to clear it out. That way you know that it's already been printed. We don't clear it out automatically because if there's a paper jam or something, you may have to use a different check, change the check number. All right, let's go back to that credit card payment. We had that $50 from Southwest, our Southwest Visa to Concordia Publishing House for VBS materials. What if it was actually $55? I'm gonna click on that transaction and say, actually, that was $55. I'm just gonna change it, edit it, click save. And now that has been edited, which should make all of our accountants very nervous. You should never edit a transaction, even for mistakes. Well, it didn't edit the transaction. It created a journal entry that has been added and connected to the original transaction. So you can see the sum, but under our audit trail, it's separate. So that way you can click here and see edited on 8/2/18. That way it protects the church from somebody going in and just making a modification to a transaction and being incorrect with it. Now, it's a little bit of a hassle for those who are editing a mistake that was made, but it's far less of a hassle than going and entering a separate journal entry for that mistake. So it kind of gets the best of both worlds. So if I go up here to settings, and I'm sorry, reports, and go to event log, you can see it created a new transaction, a revision of transaction number, and all of those. The numbers aren't as important as the fact that it happened. Now, if I click a new transaction, you can see that's just the difference, $5. That's the difference of the transaction, and it changed my credits and debits from the original transaction because it was offsetting it. All right, I hope that makes sense. We've got a number of things still to talk about, and I just noticed we're at about 15 minutes left in our overall webinar, so I'm going to move a little quickly. I'm going to go back to the home page. I'm going to go to Assets and US Bank and US Bank Checking. There we go. Now that I'm in here, I get a Reconcile button. You can reconcile all your income accounts, not your categories, your accounts, because that's where that is saved. So if I go to Reconcile and go to Checking, I can see, well, my starting balance was 0 and my ending balance was 9950. So that means I have to account for $9,950 in transactions. Well, that's pretty easy because it's just these two. So when I click on them, it gives me the selected difference is accurate, off by 0 because it's exactly perfect, and I'll click Save. When I click Save, these transactions are locked. So that is how you reconcile an account. It's pretty straightforward. I know in the church office it's less straightforward than that. You get your bank statement and you say, okay, where's this? Well, I need to add this transaction to Ledger. Or where did that one go? Oh, that's still sitting on your desk. Okay. So there's a lot of different things that can come into play with reconciling, but we try to make the reconciliation process real easy. All right, we talked about restricted funds briefly. Let me explain what that is in more detail. Under Assets, US Bank, savings. What if some of that savings is meant for a mission trip and you don't want to spend that on anything else? Well, the way you would do that is you go up to Settings and Chart of Accounts and go to Savings, and click New Restricted Fund. And we'll call that the Mission Trip Fund. And then I'll hit Submit and close out of that. Oops, let me try that one more time. Mission Trip Fund, I can't type today. There we go. Unrestricted is, well, first off, there's Mission Trip, and then a new account was created called Unrestricted Savings. So when I click Save Changes, there are now 2 accounts underneath it that act like individual accounts, even though they're still the part of the same bank account. So unrestricted means it can be spent on anything. Obviously, Mission Trips is only for mission trips. So I might want to transfer money from the unrestricted to the restricted. So I can go in here and say unrestricted savings, $2,000 are under the Mission Trip Fund, 2,000 save, and those, now that transaction has been made. So when I go back to home, go to Assets, US Bank, Savings, this is the account where I would reconcile because it's the main bank account. That's what balances with the bank statement. But I have separate accounts underneath that. And these work just like any other account. I can make payments from them, I can transfer to them, but it keeps you from spending all of the money in your bank account if most of it's restricted. So that's restricted funds. All right, a couple quick things to point out. First off, our reports are up here in the top right. And they are the core reports that you need: general ledger, income and expense, chart of accounts, balance sheet, and then the event log, which I showed earlier. These can be accessed at any time, and they can be changed. You can open and close things. You can change the date if you want to see what this year is versus last year, certain months, certain quarters, certain date ranges. You can do all of that from reports. Now, some of the reports have this convention, such as general ledger, where you can group it. So if you want to group your general ledger account and we'll do all of 2018. Oops, there we go. If we want to group it, hit this chain, sorry, and say, okay, group, oh, sorry, that's filter. There you go. You have to click right on the chain to get it to group by the type of account, equity and mortgage. So that's the initial balance, which is equity, and then the mortgage is what's due. That's the account. All right, so the last thing, and I'm already right at 150, so I apologize for going a little bit over. Under settings and roles and users, you can create as many users as you want, and each user can have as many roles as they want, and each role can be defined by itself. So if I go to add a new one that I call financial secretary, this role applies to which books? I can do one or both. You don't want to do none because then that doesn't help at all. All right, management can manage chart of accounts, can manage recurring transactions, can view all accounts, can view all givers. You could do things like that, or sorry, that one's can view, and when you save it, you can go back and say can only view certain accounts. You can also have different functionality within the software for deposits, journal entries, payments, transactions as a whole, or editing transactions, creating transfers, printing checks, creating checks. All of that can be set by your permission levels. All right, I know I covered a lot there. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and I've seen many of them in the queue. So because I've only got 9 minutes left, I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint for a quick second, do my slight little sales pitch. Really, it's if you haven't signed up for Ledger, please go ahead and do it. You've seen a lot there, and I'll show you a few more things as we answer the questions. But you can start that process at 360ledger.com. And if you end that process, if you decide to purchase by August 31st, you can save $100 off the startup fee. Now our pricing is pretty straightforward. If you go to 360ledger.com and go to our pricing page, you can see that it's basically monthly or annual pricing, and then whether you are paying in conjunction with another Church 360 application or not will change the amount you pay. So if this is the third of 3 Church 360 applications, it's only $15 a month or $175 a year. If it's by itself, it's $35 a month or $375 a year. And you can see all of the features are included in it. The only thing different is whether or not you've purchased another product. So the baseline's $375 or $35, and everything else from there is a discount. All right, that's a lot of information, I know. I want to hear your questions. If you haven't asked it yet, go ahead and put it in. But I'm going to put my contact information up on the screen while I read your questions and see what we've got going on. All right. Some of these I already answered, so I will just repeat those. Can we have dedicated giving accounts? Absolutely. You just saw that with the restricted funds. We just call it something a little bit different and operates a little bit different, being a subset of an asset account. Can you import from QuickBooks to start the software? Like I said before, unfortunately, you can't. We don't have that relationship with QuickBooks or that understanding of their file formats to do that accurately. Can different books have different security? I covered that very briefly because I was running out of time, but let me show that again. Oh yeah, here you go. So can view selected accounts. That has different levels of security because it's by an account level, but also from the books. This only applies to this set of books. So you can have multiple roles. So maybe the financial secretary for the church does things differently than the school. Just make sure you clarify that, and you can put one person in both and they get the full breadth of what those 2 roles allow. All right, Wendy's correction for my mistake with liabilities. Thank you for that. Payroll would be here under ministry with a question mark. Chad is asking that. That is up to your church. Typically, that's where you see it. Sometimes employees and benefits are a completely different section. So that really just depends on your church. Can budgets be locked? Well, yes and no. Budgets can be locked based on whether you have access to the budgets or not, based on your role. Otherwise, you can, if you wanted to, change a budget midstream. That is kind of a common process when you start to look at monthly budgets and understand things can be changed. That might be a reforecast, but you can also set it so that people don't have access to the budget because they don't have that need based on their role in the church. And so if you're limiting who has access to it, it's essentially locking it down. Can we expense or attach expense voucher authorization? Not at this time. You can't attach any files to transactions. That's a really good question, really good suggestion. Can we put different payroll line items such as taxes and deductions? Yes, you can do that. You can create a rather detailed transaction. So if you're doing it as a check payment, you can start off by putting in your unrestricted account. Let's say it's $2,000, and then maybe, yeah, I don't have these all in here, but maybe you start your expense with payroll accounts under expenses, and then you can add more accounts as you go that explain those, explain where the expenses go in. So, for example, with payroll line items, you might have something where you're withholding the tax to pay on behalf of the employee at the end of the month, so that's going to be a liability. And you may have the salary as an expense, and then the church's portion of the health care as an expense, and the overall portion of the health care, both what the church and what the person is paying, is a liability. So that's where it really comes into play, where we don't get to decide your chart of accounts because it gets more complicated, and without knowing your situation, we wouldn't know what to include. So yes, you can set it up in that way. And if you are using Paychex, which is the service, the payroll provider that we integrate with, they will work with you to set up your chart of accounts and get it synced with here. And so you can just import transactions from Paychex into Church360 Ledger, and it pre-populates everything. That's our recommendation. All right, how do we do backups? There are no backups. We do the backups for you. So we back this up on a nightly basis. We only retrieve backups in the case of emergency. We don't have emergencies, though. We have not yet had one where we had to retrieve a backup for Ledger. So that's good. And our other apps have very minimal things. I don't think Unite's ever had a backup, had to be retrieved either. But we back this stuff up regular, so you don't have to worry about it. So yeah, don't worry about that. That was from Bradford. And then Marcine is asking, will this work with Vanco? Vanco is our e-giving provider. It does work with Vanco, but via Church360 members. So your deposits come through the members link, which I should have showed you before. If you go up, when you link to Church360 members or you set up recurring transactions, an advanced feature, you'll get another icon which says, hey, a new transaction of offerings has come in from Church360 members. Go ahead and deposit that. That's how Vanco offerings come in. They come in as a new deposit from Church360 members. All right, our statements to members able to be generated with a mailing list. That is also in Church360 members. Again, I said this at the beginning, but I know some people came in late. Church360 members manages the church's contributions. So the totals of those transactions flow down into Ledger, but the correspondence with them is straight out of members because it's all about the offering information. Can you put up the promotional pricing again for me to see? Absolutely. If you, Janet, if you sign up by August 31st, we'll save the $100. And I should have clarified before when I was on this page. This is the pricing for the software. There is a $199 startup fee that includes your onboarding, your initial training for anyone on your church staff, and we work with you to get it set up and running. That is where the dollars are being taken off for this promotion. So it's normally $199. Now it's $100 till the end of August. All right, and the information is available on our website too. All right, can information be imported, exported between the three programs? Where it needs to move back and forth, it does automatically. So there's really nothing that goes from Unite to Ledger because the Vanco offerings that you might have going through your website would go through members, not directly to Ledger. But transactions from members, like deposits, does come across from members in the Ledger automatically. You don't have to do anything with it. It'll show up as a pending transaction. So where it makes sense, they all integrate. All right, and I think that's our last question. I hope I didn't miss any. If I did, I'll get back to you later on. But thank you very much for being here today. I hope you've seen how Church360 Ledger is an intuitive tool for the average layperson, the average financial volunteer at a church, and it's quite affordable. So it's really good value. If you have any questions for me and anyone else on my team, you can reach out to us at this contact information provided. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye for now.